Okay, so there we go. So I'm going to start off by asking some background, sort of demographic questions for
Mhm.
context. Excuse me. Just to provide a little background about who you are, where you come from, and your experience, and then we'll get into kind of more of the meat of what this is all about. So, to start off with, where were your parents born?
Both of my parents were born here on the lower North Shore of Quebec.
Right.
My mother was born in the small town of Old Fort Bay, and
Mhm.
my father was born in the small isolated town of St. Augustine. And I was raised in St. Augustine, but spent a lot of my time in Old Fort with my grandparents.
Okay. And where were you born?
I was the only hospital on the Lower North Shore was in Blanciblanc. So my mother went to Blanciblanc. I was born at the hospital there, but raised in St. Augustine.
Okay. And where did you receive your education, both elementary, secondary, and any post-secondary?
I My elementary was in my hometown of St. Augustine. I completed um, when I graduated from high school. There was no secondary five in my hometown, so I had to leave my community to complete my last year of high school, which I did in Sept-Îles, Quebec. And I also went to Cégep there on a 3-year program in Sept-Îles.
Very good. And what is your current occupation?
Currently, right now, I work for the Coasters Association, which is minority language nonprofit here on the lower North Shore of Quebec.
Okay. And where do you live now?
I currently live in St. Paul's River, Quebec, which is in the municipality of Bonne-Espérance on the lower North Shore of Quebec. I moved back to the lower North Shore in 2005. I had lived away for 11 years.
Mhm.
I lived in Nunavut for 2. Then I moved to Ontario. I lived in the GTA for 7, Brampton, Mississauga. Then I moved to Newfoundland and I was there for 2 years. And then I eventually moved back to the lower North Shore.
Well, this is a little off topic, but I'm going to ask you since we talked about where you lived. When you were in Nunavut, did you know Joe Hess? He
No,
ran
I
the
lived in
he ran the general store there.
which community?
Nunavut.
Nunavut is the territory.
Oh, you didn't. Oh, okay. He lived.
Yeah. I lived in Rankin Inlet, which was in
Oh, okay.
Nunavut.
He wasn't in Rankin Inlet. Okay. Okay. I take back that question.
Maybe it was in Inuvik, which is
Yeah,
a
it was in
community
Nunavut.
up there.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
was in Nunavut. Yeah. So
Yeah.
anyway. Okay, well, jumping right into the other questions here. Um, in your experience, what is the best thing you find about living in Quebec?
Well, I may be a little biased, but I think the best thing about living in Quebec is the lower North Shore.
Mhm.
It's a wonderful region that not a lot of people know of. It's primarily Anglophone communities. We have 2 Native communities. We have a French Francophone community, and we have a bilingual community. Um, Also, I think Quebec is very rich in culture. Um, I haven't felt that so much in the last few years because of the language laws that are happening, but uh, prior, I felt that English was considered important to Quebec, the Anglophones living here and the Anglophone communities and what they have to offer, but not so much right now. Although I think Quebec is a beautiful province and has many wonderful things to offer. Personally, I feel that the lower North Shore is the best part of living in Quebec.
Okay. Now describe your relationship to Quebec in a single word.
Currently, I would say detachment.
Okay, fair enough. Now, where do you feel most at home in Quebec? For example, in communities based on language, culture, profession, or geographic location?
Personally, I feel it's in communities based in language. Coming from a unilingual English community, I feel more comfortable in communities that are Anglophone. Not they don't have to be all Anglophone, but appreciate the Anglophone aspect of their community. And culture is also important to me as well. The Lower North Shore is rich in culture and rich in heritage, and I appreciate that.
Okay. Now, the next question, some people have difficulty with this, and I'll before I ask it, I'll phrase it a little bit. I talk about in the second part of this question, the official definition of Quebec. And a lot of people say to me, well, according to who? And
Mhm.
from where I come from, and where I'm trying to phrase this question is, I guess, the government's official definition of Quebec, but it's not limited to that. It could be the official definition by your peers, historically. So having said that, I'm just going to go ahead and ask this two-part question. How would you define a Quebecer? And secondly, do you think the official definition in Quebec includes you?
Um, I believe a Quebecer is someone who was born, has lived in Quebec, and contributes to the economic and social vitality of the province.
Okay. So do you think the so-called official definition of in Quebec includes you?
I would say the official definition probably does include me if language is not taken into consideration.
Okay, fair enough. Has your sense of identity as a Quebecer or Quebecois changed over the years? And if so, in what
Oh,
ways?
absolutely. It's changed quite a bit. Um, when I was living here prior to leaving and finishing my education and coming back, um, I would have said yes, I was a Quebecer. There was no issues about it. It was fine. But in light of what's been going on politically in the last few years, um, I think my sense of identity has changed. And also, I think my value to the province as defined by the current government has also changed.
Fair enough. Okay, that leads me into the next question. What are some of the most difficult things about living in Quebec?
Um, in the province as a whole, language. And I think that the current political environment is making Anglophone Quebecers more detached, more critical, and more disengaged and delusioned, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
Um, I think that's probably the main. But in the region in which I live, the most difficult thing is probably the language itself because our communities are so minorly Anglophone that we don't get to support, I feel, that the rest of the regions that are maybe Francophone get.
Okay,
It's more difficult for us to receive the same opportunities because we're Anglophone.
okay, fair enough. In recent years, Quebec's Francophone majority has identified a number of linguistic and cultural threats. Which of these concerns do you share and support? And which of these concerns make you feel excluded or targeted?
Um, I can understand the fear of losing the Francophone culture or language because I know there's been a lot of non-Francophone people moving to the region. They're holding positions that maybe they're not bilingual or they're not fluent. I can understand that aspect of it. But what concerns me is that right now, personally, I feel the province is anti-Anglophone. Um, and instead of the promotion of encouraging bilingualism, obviously, I think bilingualism would be priority. It's a wonderful asset that any person in Quebec should be able to have the opportunity to be bilingual if they wish and not have it forced upon them. I believe people should get their education in the language they are most comfortable with, in the language they will get the most out of, in order for them to get a better chance to contribute to the Quebec's economy.
And what do you feel is the biggest problem facing Quebec today? And how could that problem be resolved?
I think a huge problem facing Quebec is the potential of the outmigration of its most valuable asset, its people, moving to other provinces because of the language issue, whether it's for education purposes, for employment purposes. And I feel Quebec is going to be missing out on some valuable, valuable human resources.
Okay. Now I'm going to be borrowing from Guy's playbook here with the next question. On a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being the weakest, 10 being the strongest, indicate by a show of fingers how strongly do you feel that the joys of living in Quebec outweigh the challenges? Okay, fair enough. Now, is there anything else that you would like to say about your sense of identity or belonging in Quebec?
Um, I feel that my sense of belonging in Quebec uh, is probably one of the lowest points it's been. Belonging to the region, total opposite. But to the province as a whole, I feel my sense of belonging is very low. And that's sad. I mean, I'm born and raised in Quebec. I feel Quebec is it's getting a bad rap in other provinces. It's beginning to look more. I don't know if I should put this politically correctly. It's not attractive right now. The current environment. It's not an attractive environment that encourages people from other places to move here. I don't know if it maybe unwelcoming is the proper term, but kind of.
Well, that's great. Thank you, Shelley. I'm going to stop the recording at this point. We could continue our conversation afterwards.